No.
Hi, today I would like to talk about nation building as an aspect of historical critical theory. I would also like to thank Tyler for video recording this for me. Why build a nation? As nations began to develop and to grow, it became necessary to define who they were. Why were they special? Why were they unique? And what was their place in the world? How do they relate to the other nations? This can be done through both positive and negative ideas about themselves and about others. Many times it is not clear who a people is. It's much easier to define who they are not. So they are not this or they are not that. But it's much harder to define who you are as a nation than it is who you are not. And so negative ideas are very important in nation building. Negative ideas of the other. Nation building is the creation of an ideology that promotes a society through positive aspects. Why are they special? It also many times includes negative ideas of others around them, which promotes why their particular society is better and therefore elevates them further. Examples of some positive theories would be the Protestant work ethic by Max Weber and historicism. Examples of negative theories would be Orientalism. And I will go into explaining each of those. So Orientalism, it's a very negative term today, and it's never been a positive term. And according to Edward Said, it's the Europeans, when they're dealing with the Orient, with the East, it would be dealing with the Orient by making statements about it, authorizing views of it, describing it, by teaching it, settling it, ruling over it. In short, Orientalism as a Western style for dominating, restructuring, and having authority over the Orient. So this authority is both through physical authority. So, for example, England is in the East, they're in India. So they have a physical power over the Orient, but they also have this domineering knowledge by labeling it, controlling it, teaching it. They have another power over it. And they can't be disconnected. They're very connected on how they work together. Then there's this idea of historicism. This was the idea that Europe has developed before other nations, and that other nations outside of Europe are less developed, and so therefore they need this time of learning from the European nations. They need this period of tutelage to be able to rule themselves. And in this, there's this idea of the waiting room of history, which I will explain in just 1 minute. And then there's also the idea of the Protestant work ethic. And this is a positive idea for the English of why they are superior because of their hard work and why they work. And the Protestant work ethic is this idea that they worked hard as a duty, a pious duty. And because of this hard work, they have advanced beyond their other cultures, and this has made them superior. So to go further into Orientalism. So it was negative, it would define the East, it was used to control while European powers were also in the East. And it was used heavily in defining the English sense of their nationalism. And they used this idea of the Orient as an exotic place, but also one that was full of heathens, of animal-like people. And this was very widely depicted in their popular culture. However, the picture of the East created by the English is very unrealistic, and it is more informative about the culture that created this image than it is about the culture itself. It's more, so it shows you more about the English than it does about the peoples of the East. It doesn't show you much about an actual representation of India. Historicism is supposed to be a popular term, a positive term. However, this idea that Europe has developed first, and that these other cultures, these inferior cultures, need a time of tutelage, does two things. First, it's rather patronizing. This idea that we're superior and then therefore you need to learn from us. But it infers that the idea of culture and to be a great society, you have to be European. And so it imposes both of these ideas upon these other cultures. And so even though some may use it as a positive term, I would define it as a negative term, and it helps to create this English sense of superiority. And then the Protestant work ethic. So not all ideologies were negative, but this was used to promote why the English were superior. They had worked hard, they had gotten to this place, and other nations hadn't, and that's why they were inferior. They were inferior because they did not do the same work the English did. So this put a moral value on capitalism, and they used it as a myth to explain their success. I'm now going to show you different examples from 19th century Britain that demonstrate these three ideas. So in popular culture, you have many authors who write about the East, especially about India. India was a very popular topic for the British. You have the British Empire, you have revolts during the 1800s. So it's really a point of focus for the Victorians. And you have authors like Kipling, who write stories about the adventures of Englishmen while they're out there in the colonies. He's known for one story, William the Conqueror. He also wrote the Jungle Book. But what he's most famous for is his poem, The White Man's Burden. Then you'll also have Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who wrote Sherlock Holmes. And he also shows a view of the other, but his view of the other is of those who make it into London. So you see what happens when these others, when you have people from India coming into London, and do they pose a danger to the English? So this is Kipling's poem, The White Man's Burden. This is very influential, and it really shows this idea of English superiority. Take up the white man's burden, send forth the best ye bred. Go bind your sons to exile, to serve your captives' need, to wait in heavy harness, on flooded folk and wild, your new-caught sullen peoples, half devil and half child. Take up the white man's burden, in patience to abide, to veil the threat of terror, and check the show of pride. By open speech and simple, and 100 times made plain, to seek another's profit, and work another's gain. Take up the white man's burden, the savage wars of peace, fill full the mouth of famine, and bid the sickness cease. And when your goal is nearest, the end of others sought, watch sloth and heathen folly, bring all your hopes to naught. Take up the white man's burden, no tawdry rule of kings, but toil of serf and sweeper, the tale of common things. The parts ye shall not enter, the roads ye shall not tread, go mark them with your living, and mark them with your dead. Take up the white man's burden, and reap his old reward, the blame of those ye better, the hate of those ye guard. The cry of host ye humor, slowly towards the light. Why brought he us from bondage, our loved Egyptian night? Take up the white man's burden, ye dare not stoop to less, nor call too loud on freedom, to cloak your weariness. But all ye cry or whisper, by all ye leave or do, the silent sullen peoples shall weigh your gods and you. Take up the white man's burden, have done with childish days, the lightly proffered laurel, the easy ungrudged praise. Come now to search your manhood, through all the thankless years, cold, edged with dear-brought wisdom, the judgment of your peers. This poem, it shows a lot of their different ideas. First off, you have half devil and half child. And this is a very popular idea of those from India and from those in Africa, anyone who's pretty much outside of Europe, or not of European descent. They're not fully human, basically. They're half child, which means they still need that wisdom. They're not matured. But then also half devil, which implicates that they're definitely inferior. But the white man needs to be patient with them. The patience to abide, this is their duty, that they need to go out and help these people. And in this part right here, watch sloth and heathen folly. Without the white man, they have famine and they have sickness, and they need the white man to go help them. And then in the very last part, where it comes to your manhood, not only is this the white man's burden, but it's part of your manhood to go out into the colonies, to go out into the English Empire, to not only serve the empire, but to help these peoples. And so, is this an accurate depiction of India? Were they all really half devil and half child? I would say no, but it shows the English thought of who they were. And if you're comparing yourself to people who are half devil and half child, what does that make yourself? It really lifts up your own ideals of your own. Sir Conan Doyle also has depictions of the other. However, his stories aren't of those in the Empire outside of England. His stories take place inside of London with Sherlock Holmes, which many people are familiar with. So one of his books is The Sign of Four. The story involves several characters, but one of them being Captain Morstan, who has served in India, and basically he brings some problems back with him. And this brings the dangerous other into London. Most of the story is obviously Sherlock Holmes trying to figure out the mystery of who murdered who. But the representations of those outside of London were not accurate. There's this one point where he is doing research, and in the book there is this encyclopedia entry, which is completely fabricated. But once again, if you are a Londoner and you have not been outside the Empire, you're reading Kipling's poems, you're reading Sherlock Holmes, and this is going to be what's forming your idea of India and of the East. And so this purely fictional entry states that the Aborigines of the Andaman Islands may have perhaps claim the distinction of being the smallest race upon Earth. They are naturally hideous, having large, misshapen heads, small, fierce eyes, and distorted features. So we can see once again the physical description of these peoples is not flattering, but it's also, they're naturally hideous. So there's something in their nature that makes them less than the English. And also, this is still during a period where people believed that sometimes your physical appearance would show your actual character. That idea hadn't fully left yet. So if you look like a heathen, you must be a heathen. If you look like a snake, you must have the characteristics of a snake. And then another description in his work is when they're chasing this criminal from India. And he's described as, he had never have I seen features so deeply marked with all bestiality and cruelty. His small eyes glowed and burned with a somber light, and his thick lips were writhed back from his teeth, which grinned and chattered at us with half-animal fury. So once again, we have this idea of less than human. They're more like animals. They're not as, they're in the waiting room. They're not here yet. They're not part of English culture. They're inferior. And so you have these ideas that build up. And once again, if you don't get outside of London, if you don't get outside of England, and this is what you're considering India to be like for your pop culture, it's going to be a very skewed idea. The Victorians also loved their freak shows. They were obsessed with the other and anything that was abnormal. And so they had freak shows in which these were displayed. There were some English cases, like you have the Elephant Man. However, they also had cases such as Lalu, the double-headed Hindu boy, and Crow, the missing link. So Lalu is the double-headed Hindu boy. And this raised a lot of concerns. The first reason, they're twins that are attached. So they have one head, but two hearts. Lalu is a man, but his twin is a girl. So this raised questions about sexualities with Victorian culture. They were obsessed with the sexualities outside of England as well. This idea that it was exotic in the Orient, in Africa. But you have these examples, and they're paraded. They love to go to these. They like to see the other. You also have Crow, who is an African girl who had a lot of body hair. And she was considered the missing link for evolution. And once again, it shows concern for sexuality. In most of the photos and the depictions of her, she's highly sexualized. And once again, it was outside of Europe. She comes from Africa. And so this is view of the other. Let's see what they have there. They also had fairs and exhibits. And these would show not only English ingenuity, but also the ideas of who are outside the empire. So they used the fairs and exhibits to promote their own cultures. For example, the colonial and Indian settlement of 1886 was described as where the stoutly earned results of a widespread domination, the fruits of British pluck, endurance, and industry. So they have this idea of their work ethic, the Protestant work ethic that got them to this point. So they've earned the place they are in society, they've earned their empire, and you can see the fruits of it. And then also, we have like another exhibition, the London Portobello Garden, where the Londoners could see bush savages from the wilds of South Africa every night exhibit the habits and customs of their native country, tracking and killing the lion, leopard, buffalo, and their superstitious bush dance. And so once again, we have these exhibits which would show not only the positive idea of why the English are better, but the negative ideas of other, which promotes the English identity. And then I do have this photo, and it shows different English workers, whether making a sweater or needlework. And it says specimens from Mr. Punch's industrial exhibition of 1851 to be improved for 1851. So it's from 1850 to be improved 1851. So this idea that look at our pluck, but it's going to be better. So still this idea of changing. As you can see, there was not one idea which built the English identity. It was a mixture of both positive and negative ideas. And they interweaved itself into the culture of the English society. And it's important to note the difference between politics and cultures and how they intertwine. The English Empire was built, but then you have all these ideas of culture that are created that continue to reinforce this idea of empire. Not all these ideas were around before the English created their empire, but once they have created their empire, once they have these ideas, once you have these myths created, it continues to reinforce the political reality. I do have some suggested readings here. Some of them about Orientalism, provincializing Europe, which talks about historicism to a degree, and also the Protestant work ethic, and then also some readings which display the different examples I use of English culture in the 19th century. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed this video.